Okay, hi, I'm Jen McFarlane, and I am here with Becky Lebrun and Corri Lee Deitsch. Different hard names for me too, but we are talking today about the secret superpowers of the spectrum and what it's like living with attention differences. So, we see a huge rise lately in diagnosed things like ADHD, ADD, autism, Asperger's, all of these things. And we just want to open up the conversation. I'm excited to be talking with these two ladies who basically have been learning from their children, which is beautiful, which is what we do as moms, as parents. And learning about, for Corri Lynn, she noticed that she had some of these differences when she was working with her son, trying to figure different things out. So what is it like to have adult diagnosis? And we're going to look further into, as we go, with not really, what is it like beyond the diagnosis? Because a diagnosis can really limit things and put things in a box, I find. So let's get right to it. Let's start the conversation. And I invite any of you who are listening to ask questions, reach out to any of us as you're listening, because, support and knowing that there's people that have been through things that can understand what you're going through can help so many people along the way when they're understanding things and when they're not understanding things too. So I'm going to sort of ask each one of you, just so that we don't talk over top of each other. I want to thank you both so much for being here first. Thank you so much. This is, I think it's an interesting topic. It's new for me in speaking about this, but I think it's important to recognize that it's a big part of our human evolution right now. So, Corri Lynn, why don't you tell us about your journey a little bit with your son?
For sure. So when my son was born, probably, I was going to say, as we got kind of busy with toddler life and out and about, we'd have people make comments like, is he always so busy? And then we started preschool, and the lady at the preschool said, I think maybe it would be worth getting him tested. And to me, he was normal in my world, like all my nephews, how I grew up. So we were like, okay, we'll go through this process, and we're put in with a fantastic organization in Calgary that focuses on early childhood development, and started to do all these questions and surveys and testing, and at the end of it, it came out that he ended up with that diagnosis of ADHD, but they gave that by default because he was sort of on the spectrum towards, they actually called it a new age of boys, specifically boys, that they didn't have a category for, that they didn't fall in line specifically with Asperger's. They didn't meet all the criteria for that, but they kind of fell in this middle land. So we left with this diagnosis of ADHD. But in doing all those testing, as we're answering these questions, it was literally like going, that sounds like me. I do that, or I have this. And so it just became to kind of put pieces together in our life. And one of the questions that they asked us, which I thought was an interesting question at the time, was, is this normal? And my response back to them was, well, it's normal for us. Like, it was normal in our house. It was normal in the house I grew up in. So it started to make me have this thing of, well, this has got to be like familiar. My parents, my nephews. So for us, it was a really good support system because we were already living and coping and building strategies in our lives. But now we had this piece and some new tools to work with and move forward with. So that's where our journey started.
Yeah.
Then, yeah.
And through that, you came to understand that you were in this spectrum of attention differences as well. I love calling it that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, my son will actually say, Mom, I think you have more than me. And I'm like, yeah, totally do. But if we were comparing notes, definitely. But so where my journey came was sort of a high stress point in my life with my job, and my mother-in-law was quite ill and lots of stressors going on, and I was probably not coping as well. Like all the tools that I had in my bag that I had just developed instinctively were kind of falling apart. I wasn't able to hold it all together. And so I had gone to the doctor just to talk about it. And that's when we went through the testing for myself, just to say like, hey, this is it. So I did try the medicine with it, and it does have its pluses, and it works, and sometimes that's a good thing. I ultimately didn't end up taking it because I felt that my 40 years for what I was doing was working better for me than some of the side effects that I did. But it's been a really interesting journey, kind of going parallel with my son in that experience, and seeing those differences as he hits milestones or different, like he's actually graduating high school this year. And the challenges of, studying for departmentals and looking for what's next. And so, it definitely has a new filter on it for us.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing your experience with the unfolding of all of that in your life. Okay, Becky, let's hear about your journey. Now you work with children now, and their families. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your little one, your little teacher?
Okay. I do work with children and their families now, and I found out really that this was my calling from one of my little ones. I'm a single mom of 5. I have a set of twins, and one of my twins, she just had a really hard time, I guess, with life. Really, I was in a cycle of abuse for a long time. And I feel that she just held on to a lot of those things, even though she was so young. And she didn't act like a quote unquote normal child. She, most kids are carefree and full of love and life, and they find so much awe and wonder and everything. And not that she never experienced those things, but she did a lot of screaming in people's faces. She had a lot of agitation. She liked to be in solitude. She, anytime she drew pictures, they were pictures of people crying. She would have tantrums and arch her back and throw herself on the floor. And it was just really something that I was like, my gosh, why isn't she, living this joyous life that children, really live, and what is going on here? And she had a tantrum at the doctor's and kind of screamed in his face, and he just kind of looked at me, and I looked at him, and he said, we were getting ready to leave the appointment, and he said, we could look into this further and do some testing. We're not going to do anything about it today, but we'll talk about this at your next appointment. And because of the abuse that I was stuck in, I literally lost everything that I had. I took my kids to my parents' house. They had custody so that I could really rebuild a life for me and my children after getting out of that cycle, and losing literally everything I had, to include my children, not just my personal belongings, not just my house. My children were at my parents'. It really, just gave me such a deeper understanding and connection to my children, I think. I held guilt around that for a while, but really I realized that that was the most unselfish thing that I could have done, was to make sure that they were safe and cared for, you know, and provided for while I rebuilt our lives where we lived. And, you know, in doing that and just kind of, I guess, observing with an outside eye, not so much, you know, because they were at my parents' house and because I was rebuilding things here, and I still saw them on a, you know, regular basis. But I think me really taking that outside look into what was going on with her made me realize, like, there has got to be something going on here, you know. And I dove deep into a spiritual journey and into energy healing and into different things like that. And to be very honest, there was a day that I just, you know, fell to the ground with tears in my eyes. She had a really rough day, and I fell to the ground with tears in my eyes, and I said, please help me to help her. Please help me to make this, you know, easier for her. And I've been doing this with her for 3 years, and I still get emotional about it every time. You know, and I had just a big learning curve that took place, and I was called to different energy healings, and I started working with her energetically. She was between 2 and 2.5. She's 5.5 now, and there has been such a drastic turnaround in her. You know, instead of screaming in people's faces, she hugs and loves on people. She is all about rainbows. She, you know, is all about love and nature. And it's just been a remarkable journey that has really opened to my eyes, you know, to what's really going on in this, you know, in this day and age. And, you know, I think that many of us are opened and awakened to new ideas, and that there is absolutely no coincidence that, you know, all of these different things are on the rise right now, you know, because our world's going through a shift, and this is just part of that shift.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing us to that point, because one of the things that I'm really tuned into is seeing sort of the human potential evolve. And I've always, you know, whenever, even, you know, 10 years ago when we first started hearing about autism and ADHD, I guess that's been there sort of rising for a while. But something inside of me always said, you know, even though there were these labels and judgments, something inside of me always said, these people are extremely gifted. You need to start listening to them. What are they tuned into? And then I started reading, and, you know, it was always like, okay, there was always these strong gifts, like mathematically gifted, or, you know, even seeing energetic things that regular people quote regular people don't see, don't feel, don't understand. So it's also my understanding that a lot of people, children and adults, I guess, you know, we forget to put adults in there as this gifted people, is that, how do I say this? They're highly empathic. They feel, and there's no sort of time in between the feel and the reaction time, is what I came to really see. But I had a cousin who had 2 autistic children, and although, you know, they may have had learning curves in certain areas, extremely gifted in other areas. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, the secret superpowers. What's really going on there, or what, to this point, in watching our human evolution, seeing this rise, what are some of these superpowers, and why do you think that our children are shifting so much? really, right? And the adults that had been shifting are really the leaders, the teachers, the helpers reaching out to the children and saying, you know what, I understand what you're going through. I can help you, rather than just diagnose and use sort of the left brain stuff to try to fit them into a regular quote category, right? And you can correct me if I'm way off. So I'd like to hear, Corri, Lynn, your take on that, sort of the giftedness and the superpowers and the potential of human evolution. What do you think is really happening there?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because when they talk about it being a deficit, often it's talking about the frontal lobe in the brain. It's kind of like the analogy from Dr. Hallowell, that he says that our brains are like Ferraris. They're super, super high energy, burning fast, but we don't have the brakes. We have like the brakes of a Fiat.
Mm-hmm.
So that reaction time to things, or to cope. But honestly, I think the brain is where it has this deficit in one area. It is firing on all cylinders in full color. Everything's louder, brighter. In the rest of the brain, tapping into areas where others aren't. So those gifts come from the way you observe things, the way that you intensify kind of that hyper focus that if you're interested in something, you take it to 10 times to the extreme, to the 100th power, whatever you're involved in. You just go deeper, wanting to know more, learn more, share more. So, like I said, I think there's this part of the brain that's just opening up other parts
Mm-hmm.
that I would consider part of that, those superpowers that they have. So it's trying to manage and tame in that world that we live in, and just because it's so busy all the time in your head, like the ability of turning. I'm always in awe of people that say, like, that question, like, what are you thinking about? And they say nothing, and they genuinely mean it. And I'm like, can't even relate, don't even understand how that's even a possibility. I have like 20,000 tabs open, different discussions, every thought that's ever come in. So as I said, to me, there's something going on at like rapid fire. So
Yeah.
And I think the reason that's happening now, or that feeling of the why, is because we have this ability to do that. We don't stop. There's like this endless need to keep looking and finding and going, and that's going to unlock new things, new potential, new ideas. Like, you can never kind of stop you from going, oh, okay, well, why is that? Why is it? The constant why of the typical 3-year-old just keeps on going. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And, as we talk about this more, I think all of the people listening, and including myself, we start to see places in our own lives where we have access to that, where we do that, where we hyper-focus, where we become obsessed with something and can't let it go. We've got to dig deeper, keep going. And that rapid fire, when you said that, it's like, oh yeah, I've experienced that, when it's just like, oh my God, I can't sleep, I can't do anything until I figure this out. And it's one of the things that I love the most about myself, is when I get in that zone of hyper focus.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Becky, how do you interpret that, sort of like seeing the superpowers of our rising, gifted, not just children, humanity, really?
Well, I like to approach it because of the work that I do and because of many of the things that brought me here, to where I am at this moment in time. I like to approach it from a like a spiritual and an energetic angle. And in my experience, not only with my own daughter, but with other children that I work with, energetically speaking, I feel I do like, you can compare it to Reiki, I guess. When I do work with other children, I do energetic healing that is comparable to Reiki. It's a little different, but close. People that I try to explain it to, I say, well, it's like Reiki, it's like Reiki, and then they understand that. So, and when I connect, like you said, very empathic, I am very clairsentient, which means I feel a lot from others. And when I do this work with children that may have a diagnosis, a lot of times their energy feels, quicker to me, if that makes sense, a little more high speed to me. And from my experience, children with some of these diagnoses, which I really don't put labels on, but they're very, very connected to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be called to you, I honor, but they are very, very connected to something bigger than ourselves. And so they have a way of just knowing things. And they have a way of, give me just 1 second. I have to mute for just 1 second. I'm so sorry about that. They just have a way of knowing things. And, that hyper thought process, as I was feeling into this and I'm, get all these feelings and get all this way of knowing, I do research on things also. So to drop a fun fact, in ancient times, the Mayans who made the calendar and told people in ancient times where, when, and how to plant crops were thought to be autistic also. So that's just a little fun fact to know. But, now that our world is going through this shift energetically and we as humanity are rising, to a different level of understanding and love and vibration and consciousness, we see more and more of, people like this. And like I said earlier, it's no mistake that that's happening. And, I've even talked to people before and I said, you, like you said, you can start really when you can start realizing these things are happening, where they've happened in your own life, and as we go on this journey and we start to awaken and we start to connect to, something bigger than ourselves, I think that we too notice that, things are, sounds are louder and things are brighter, lights are brighter and, different things feel different, and they already have that going on within their life, so really to me, it's not even about, we should really not worry about bringing somebody to our world, but really meet them in theirs. Yeah. Is really what we should be striving to do, and that's been something really powerful for me throughout this journey, is really trying to meet somebody in there. We all grew up with so much societal conditioning and being put into a box and, really kind of having what's magical about us conditioned out of us, and the time that's upon us right now is honoring that magic in each and every one of us. And if we were honored that way as children, imagine where the world would be now, and that's where we're shifting to. Yeah. So it's really about meeting them where they're at and honoring them for who they are. Mm-hmm. You can still have beautiful boundaries, to keep, respect and, just boundaries to keep, I guess, just peace in your life, but really honor them for who they are and what they're going through. And you'll really probably learn something about yourself in the process, and start bringing your magic back alive within yourself.
Mm-hmm. And we're all moms, so I'm sure that we've all experienced what it's like to learn from our children. And it's something, my son is 12 now, and he's my greatest teacher. I'm sure he will be for the rest of my lifetime. And one of the things I think, just listening to you both, is to remember, you know, before we judge, why not honor and learn from wherever we're judging in the world, you know? And we don't even mean to judge. It's a natural, can be a very subtle subconscious thing. But what comes to me right now is there is nothing less than. We've often been taught that with these labels, within the spectrum, that there's something that's missing, something that's not working right. And I am feeling within this conversation that we're opening up to a space where instead of seeing that there's something wrong or something missing, let's try to see it like there's a lot added and we can learn from. That's how I see it. I think we're all very gifted. And I think the more we listen to the gifts, instead of trying to put a label and judgment on, that's where we start to evolve spiritually a lot more. I would love to hear about, you know, where can people go? What have you guys found, you know, besides yourselves? You can always reach out to Becky, reach out to Corri, Lynn. I know both of these women, and they're fabulous, and they come from the most beautiful heart space. So if you need something, if you need some help, some support in any of those areas, feel free to reach out to those two. But I would love to know anything that you both have found. Corri, Lynn, we'll start with you, that in the form of support or books or videos that you've seen, anything that really helped guide you on this path and in an empowered way.
Yes, absolutely. So first thing I want to say, I'm having like this little aha moment as Becky's talking about the energy, because I often feel like we speak as a tribe. There's people that I'm drawn to, there's kids that I'm drawn to, and later you go, oh, that's why. But it's starting to make sense to me that it's not like this radar that I have to pick out everybody in the room that has these tendencies. I'm guessing it has to do more with this energy that you're speaking of. So I thought that was an interesting topic. So some of the resources that I've found quite helpful, or on the positive one, because again, I agree with you where it's not a less than. And often when people are given labels, it's he has autism, or instead of saying he is autistic, like that's who he is and it's awesome, versus it's a bad thing. Or right, living with ADD versus feeling bad, curling up and rolling your shoulders over because you have it and you're worried that somebody's going to think less of you. So just in the vernacular of how we talk about people or their things, I think that's a good shift for people to open up to, right? Is to look at those gifts and magic and not make people feel bad for the things that they have or they're dealing with, right? It's not something any of us that are dealing with this can change. So it needs to be embraced. And the things that I found for resources have always leaned more on the positive side, embracing those differences, not trying to make us fit in the box, because there's 100% we don't live in the box. We are so far out of the box. Trying to put us in isn't going to work. So the resources I found have always been to highlight the positive. So Dr. Hallowell was one of the first resources and books that I had read, and that was where that imagery of that you have like a Ferrari brain and crappy brakes. So things like that is to look for things that are a positive resource and
Yeah.
positive support group instead of trying to fix you, because you don't need to be fixed. You need to learn to embrace and draw out and cope in those sort of things. But it gives us such great opportunity to kind of work on, sort of how you said, bring other people to meet us, to help them understand, kind of a sensitivity training that, okay, this is how you see it, this is how we see it, how can we meet in the middle?
Yeah.
So there's great online resources and things like that too. There's if you're into Facebook or YouTube, there's a great gal that does some videos with tips and tricks. And so that would be my main tip, is if you're going to look for resources, find the positive people. There's enough negativity in this world. Don't look at the resources that don't bring good energy with you. So,
yeah.
And I can share that link to a couple of those for you.
Sure. If you send that to me after, I can put it in with everything that we put it out with. And I love that, Corri. The Ferrari brain with shitty brakes. I'm pretty sure I've got that. Can you tell me the doctor's name?
Yeah, it's Dr. Hallowell, Hallowell.
Hallowell. Okay. So that's Dr. Hallowell. Cool.
Yes. And then there's, and he's got a great series of books targeted for kids, targeted to adults, targeted to if dealing with it within your working world. Mm-hmm. And again, it's embracing what those gifts are and how to kind of tweak them to fit into the ordinary world. Yeah. The girl that I follow that I think is fantastic, she's young and embracing things. Her Facebook and YouTube is called How to ADHD.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to say with that, a lot of people out there in the world know me as a mindset girl. So I find so much mindset is needed around this, especially for families that do, go the route and they've gotten a diagnosis or they've been put in a label. What can happen is, it's kind of like getting a diagnosis that you've got a few months to live. All of a sudden, your whole life feels different, changes. And so I think with mindset, you've got to see that it's a gift instead of something else other than a gift. And really every day wake up and start saying, wow, I want to learn from this gifted child, or I want to learn more about my gift today, and see where that brings you. We the people are the ones really with the power to change things, to change the way the collective mass consciousness views things. And so let's one by one start to use a collective mindset to change the way we're viewing some of these things. Okay, Becky, do you have any lovely resources or things that helped you along the way that we can share with others?
Well, during my work with children, I also started bringing the way that I parent, the style that I parent. I've really changed that around also. And there are a few books by Dr. Tasbury that are very good, and I will give you the spelling because it's not exactly like it sounds. Okay. One is called Conscious Parenting. Another one is called The Awakened Family. Those are two very good books to kind of bring light to, the parenting side of things as far as honoring our children for who they are and things like that. I'm trying to think. I agree about looking for the positive. And really, there's so many resources out there, but my recommendation is don't do what everybody else tells you. Really see what works for you. There's a few groups that I'm on in Facebook that I joined, and once I was there, I was like, nope, can't do it. I'm out. It was a very kind of victimhood space. And to not discount that this can be very hard, because it absolutely can be, but like you were talking about mindset, it's imperative to, switch into, instead of being in a victimhood mindset, to switch into that, oh my gosh, this is really magical. Let me approach it from that side of things. Yeah. And the other thing that I want to bring up, and this is something that I learned and that many of us as mothers or parents really don't do, please focus on yourself. I mean, focus on yourself and what feels good to you, and take some time for yourself, for your self-care and your self-love, because as you're going through this journey, figuring things out, not only with children, but even from adult standpoint in life itself, you can get overwhelmed very easily. So that's probably my biggest bit of advice, is really honor yourself throughout this process also. Because in doing so, I think that when we honor ourselves and take time for ourselves, we're naturally drawn, magically the things that we are naturally drawn to and that supports the best show up, So I would say that that's probably my biggest thing, is really self-care and honor yourself before, anything else.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important key to anything. You gotta, in order to have the patience, otherwise you'll get frustrated and angry at things. You need to make sure you're getting enough sleep, eating well, basic things, right? But also treating yourself well, because when we treat ourselves well, when we have patience with ourselves, we have more of that available for our children, for people around us, people in schools, teachers. Take care of yourself so that you can deal with some of this high energy, which is how I see it. It is a very high energy. And a lot of people are walking around with like energy overload. So we need to learn how to take care of ourselves so we can be compassionate, be love, be there for other people with a huge listening ear, like a learning ear. I want to thank you both so much for joining, for sharing what you know. The last thing that just came up as you were talking is a lot of people are wondering where things like indigo children and rainbow children and crystal children, where do they fit on this spectrum? Is it the same spectrum? Because here's the funny thing, we think of those as gifted children naturally. For some reason, it's how it was brought to us. It's how we were programmed to look at it. But do you think, in your opinions, that really we're looking at all the same energy upgrade? Corri Lynn.
Yes. And can I just add one thing just before I jump into that, just on the back part of when you're looking for resources?
Yes.
Becky spoke of finding things that are right and fit for you. And that is so true. So depending as a parent, if you're looking for a parent resource,
yeah.
If you're not on the spectrum yourself, the resources that you may gravitate would be entirely different than something that I would gravitate. I call it like the ADHD friendly resources.
Mm-hmm.
Compared. So just keep that in mind when people are looking for things, depending where you find. If you pick up a textbook and it reads like a textbook and it's not engaging to you and you can't get through it, look for something that
Keep
condensed
looking.
text, has pictures. Keep looking, right? There, it's out there. You just have to find the stuff that works for you. So, and I totally think they're on the right path. That I would put you in the category of being an indigo or a crystal. If you had a little tick list and went through like, are you one? They would almost mirror, parallel each other. And I think it's just the hat that people are wearing. That seems like a really cool, positive thing that people talk about versus this other label. So 100% those characteristics, those we are those children. We are. So yes, if that's the label that we should be putting on versus the other, because people are more open and to seeing those gifts, and absolutely a place to go.
Thank you. Becky, what do you got for us on that?
Nope, I agree 100%. I think that all of the children that are, on the spectrum are definitely, an indigo, crystal, rainbow. I also find parents that I work with kind of get stuck in those labels though too, which is kind of funny. Like, oh, are they a rainbow? Are they a crystal? And my advice, yeah, exactly. And here's my advice. And so when all of those were written about all those years ago, crystals and rainbows and indigos, that was a best guesstimate of time as to when there was going to be an influx of these children. It was a best guesstimate of time. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, what I see nowadays is so many of our children hold different characteristics from each. So you really don't want to put them in a box as far as, different things like that. They may have one characteristic that sticks out predominantly from that, type of child. And that's fine. For instance, like I talked about my daughter earlier, everything with her is rainbows. She talks about the rainbow bridge. She talks about rainbow energy, and I know for a fact that she is a rainbow child, but if you're getting pulled towards one thing or another for your child, that is with you for a reason. So that's probably the case. But the fact of the matter is, so many of our children hold characteristics of each different type that they've talked about. And the best guesstimate was, which is fabulous and fabulous resources, but linear time only exists here, So that's why it was, a great estimate of when a rise in these different types of children are, going to come about. But I guess my biggest advice is don't get caught in labels of any kind. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if approaching it from that angle is, what makes you feel great, then by all means approach it from that angle, but just know that our children are here to, aid in the shift that the world's going through. They're here to help us all rise. It's no mistake that we are, that our children are our best teachers, because that's really what they're here for. You know what I mean? That's what they're coming here for, and then we can guide them best, in this, we can guide them best in the human aspect of things. And it's just a beautiful evolution that takes place between, child and adult. And it's really an honor to be alive and going through all of this, to see it all taking place. It's been an amazing journey for me, and I just think that we should get off labels altogether. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so true.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's so true about the labels, because even within all of those labels, when we talk about the colors or all these different things, they really are like a prism, how it splits the light into a spectrum of colors. There's so much diversity and various facets. So not two individuals will have the same pieces. So that's when you, like I said, if you were looking at things, you could find that you could fit partly in this and partly in that. So yes, those labels, you're your own you. And it's great that we're at the point where we get to embrace that and let ourselves shine.
Yeah. Beautiful. So, in closing, I would love to say what a beautiful opening to a conversation that I think everybody should be having, because you know, when we step away from labels and we realize that we're all here, unique individual beings, part of the same, united as one. We're all gifted. We all have our own ways of doing things, you know, and growing that light, listening to each other, learning from each other, and stepping away from judgment and learning to really honor and love the uniqueness of everybody that we meet, everybody on this planet. So I really do feel like a part of this shift is about shifting away from us all trying to be the same, which is what we've been doing for way too many years, and embracing the differences and seeing the beauty and the colors and the potential of life in that. We're not all meant to be here being the same. We're not. And I'm excited about to see where it's all taking us. So I want to thank you, ladies, for being a part of this. I'll have what I can have about your information and stuff in the posts that go along with this. And anything to say just before we jump off from either of you? We're all good.
Not that I can think of, but thank you for having me. You know, like you said, this is a conversation that needs to start happening.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And thank you both for the work that you do and the way that you reach out to the world. It truly does make a big difference. And if you're listening to this, feel free to share it. And, you know, let's uplift the collective. Let's bring more color, more life into the collective. Okay? So thanks so much, ladies, for being here. And I hope we get to have an expansive conversation like this again soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.